This next mobilization sequence we're going to demonstrate is for those of you who have bunions or are starting to develop a bunion. And just to remind you how a bunion typically occurs, there is no always, but this is a typical scenario. So Jessie, if you could just point to the first metatarsal, and then if you could point to the big toe bone. So typically, one typical scenario is that the first metatarsal starts moving too far in toward the midline of the body, and then the big toe compensates by moving away from the midline of the body. And I'm going to zoom in here so you can see that that actually creates a gap between the two bones. And the body's response to a gap is to fill it in with calcification. So we want to address both deviations. We want to address the first metatarsal and then go to the big toe. So to mobilize the first metatarsal, remember it's going too far in toward the midline of the body. We want to encourage it to go the other direction. Jessie's going to take her hands, we call it a pincer grab, and she's going to take the web part of her hand, if you could even just point to the web part of your hand. Beautiful. And with that web part of her hand, she's going to grab the foot between the heel and the first metatarsal bone. Then she's going to take her other hand and she's going to really grab the first metatarsal bone with the web part of her hand. So she's holding the other metatarsals, but the intention is really on that first metatarsal bone. Her first vector of pull is the first metatarsal away from the heel to create space between the bones, and then she's going to spring that first metatarsal away from the midline of the body. Beautiful. Then we're going to move up to the next juncture, the junction between the first metatarsal and the big toe bone. And she's going to grab with one hand the first metatarsal and hold it still, and with her other hand she's going to grab the big toe bone. Her first vector of pull is pulling the big toe bone away from the heel to create space between the bones, or traction, and then she's going to bring that big toe bone toward the midline of the body and then return it to its original position. Traction, and good. And she's going to do that 3 times. We're going to show you on her foot what it looks like. Now we are playing with the camera angle, and you'll have to at home kind of figure out what grab works best for you. So she's going to take one hand and really, with the web part of her hand, grab onto her foot closer to the heel and just off the first metatarsal bone. With her other hand, she's going to take the web part of her hand and really grab that first metatarsal bone. She's doing beautifully. She's going to, her first vector of pull is traction, the first metatarsal bone away from the heel, and then she's going to spring it away from the midline and let it return. And spring, traction, spring it away and let it return. Traction, spring it away. Beautiful. Let's do it 2 more times. And beautiful. So she's opening up the inside of the foot. Beautiful. We're going to move on to the next junction, which is between the first metatarsal and the big toe bone. She's going to grab the metatarsal head, which is the ball of the foot. So she's really grabbing the ball of the foot, and with her other hand, the first vector of pull is she's going to pull the big toe away from the metatarsal, and then she's going to pull it in toward the midline of the body and back to the starting position. Traction, in toward the midline of the body and back to the starting position, and traction in toward the midline and away. Traction in toward the midline, and one last time, and traction, pull it away from the heel and in toward the midline. Beautiful.